Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Actually, if you have children, please put them away for a moment. I don't know. Can you do that? Anyway, with that being said, welcome to the Catholic Citizen. It's always great to see you week in, week out as we cover the important things you need to know as a citizen who is Catholic or Christian or a person of goodwill as you try to educate yourself and be prepared to preach the truth in the public square. We want to equip you with the knowledge necessary to have those important conversations with folks to help them form their conscience, not only for voting, but for living itself. There's so much going on in the world today that we have to be informed, not overly informed that we obsess about it. There's a balance here. We don't want to make our entire life about politics and things happening in the public square, but we do want to be informed because, look, the reality is, folks, the enemy is at the gates. Actually, the enemy is in the gates. The smoke of Satan has entered the church, as we have learned from our church leaders. So we have to fight the enemy. We fight the enemy because we have to protect our families, protect our kids, protect our fellow brothers and sisters in the faith, because ultimately we want everybody to make it to heaven. And they're not going to make it into heaven if they're not living in accordance with the truth. It's not just a one-time I accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior and then I'm done. We have to pick up our cross daily and follow him. So on today's show, it's better than your top 10. And we have to ask, are we going to survive? I certainly hope we do. But it's better than top 10 because we are going to cover 11 stories you should know about this week on the Catholic Citizen. So you're informed, ready to articulate the truth in the public square. First, absolute tragedy. And this story made it headline news, of course, during the campaign because of how devastating it was, and even more devastating for the father of Laken Riley today or this week to read his daughter's diary, her last journal entry, or one of the last ones, in the murder trial during her case. So Laken Riley, again, 22-year-old nursing student from the University of Georgia, in February was found dead, unfortunately, because she was killed by Jose Antonio Ibarra, 26, a Venezuelan citizen who crossed the United States-Mexico border, was caught, according to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, but then was released and was allowed to wait trial here in the United States. And during this time, he ran Laken down. He tried to assault her and killed her, ultimately destroying her life and her family's life in the process. Laken's last journal entry was a beautiful, heartfelt written kind of poem, kind of letter to her future husband about honoring Christ in their marriage. But she'll never get to meet her future husband until heaven because of her tragic death. Again, this story made news, but the reality is, folks, from Venezuela alone, we have 15 states now that have gains from Venezuela that are here that weren't here 4 years ago because we have open border policies. Open border meaning someone comes in, we catch them, but then we simply release them into the general populace. And this is the result that happens when you have open border policies. We need to reform our immigration system, but we have to have a border. You can't have a sovereign nation without the border. And so hopefully President Trump is going to work on that immediately when he comes into office. You may have seen recently in the news, there's an entire caravan coming in to the United States once again before the borders are closed when President Trump takes office. All right, second story here. Robert Kennedy Jr. A lot of people excited about his appointment to the Trump administration, including maybe even Nick. They are completely misguided.
Hey, wait a second. Hold on. Don't misrepresent me. Thank you, Keifa, Little Rock.
I have heard Nick's excitement before in his voice when he's talking about Robert. I think he has a little man crush going on. With that being said, so Robert Kennedy, he's been appointed as Health and Human Service Secretary. Look, we don't need another pro-abortion HHS secretary, but that's exactly what we have. And when Robert was running for president, he went on Sage Steele's podcast. And on that podcast, he was asked, should there be any limits to abortion? And Kennedy said, no, even if it is full term. He said that I think we have to leave it with the woman rather than the state. Now, he didn't say that 10 years ago. He said that May of this year. Now, he kind of walked back on that a little bit when there was some backlash and everything. And now his stance is at the age of viability, the baby deserves, the right to life. But before viability, which, by the way, has been ever changing because of the science, which continues to push back viability of the child, meaning it can survive outside the womb. But it's not only that issue on transgender issues. In 2023, December, he told political commentator Patrick Bet-David that he did not support a ban on gender-affirming care for minors. Why? Because he did not, quote, know enough about it to say that it should be completely illegal. Now, this just shows lack of judgment on Kennedy's part. And look, I support him when it comes to, what he wants to do with foods and getting the dyes out of foods and things of that nature. My kids don't eat those dyes themselves because my wife is very up on this kind of nutrition stuff. And I also appreciate that he is just he's a strong male who wants people to be healthy again. And so why don't we emphasize exercise? Why don't we emphasize eating right rather than emphasizing the pharmaceuticals? He's also talked about holding kind of the pharmaceutical companies accountable for some of the things they do, including vaccines. Fantastic. Great. Love all that. But if you're not good on these fundamental issues, I question the very rightness of your positions on those other issues. So he's got to get right on these issues and pray for him. He's a Catholic. So it's very, very frustrating, but he should be denied communion right now based upon his position on the abortion issue.
Can I toss out a question? This is legitimately me asking you a question,
yeah.
Mr. Range. Mm-hmm. Master Range.
No, I am not a master in any way, shape, or form.
False.
Please.
You have a master's degree.
This is true. I do.
So, Master Range. Henceforth, you shall be known as Master Range on the show, at least by me. Anyways, my question to you is, I just had a conversation with someone that had to do with politicians that are not incredible human beings, but does that immediately disqualify them as being sent by God? And this question came up in the context of Trump, not in the context of RFK Jr. And I'll admit publicly here that in the past, I've been in the past elections very apologetically a Trump voter, a very apologetic Trump voter. This time around, I was an enthusiastic Trump voter, despite he is still the same human being. He's undergone some incredible events in his life that I'm sure were life-changing, right? So he's probably not exactly the same human being. Getting shot at on live television probably doesn't leave you as the same human being. Number of things like that. But I was this time around an enthusiastic Trump voter because the alternative is so dramatically distorted and frankly supporting such overtly evil things like the mutilation of children, like injecting them with hormones and forever changing them for the rest of their lives when they are innocent kids that don't know better, right? So many things. We could go on and on. But the point is, it occurred to me as I was having this discussion with someone, there's biblical precedent, like a lot of it, for God calling people who are very, very flawed. So this came up specifically in the context of President Trump's sexual improprieties over the years, and some of them blatantly just alleged improprieties, and some of them like the conversation that was recorded that he had with someone at one point where he said, you grab body parts, okay. And it dawned on me as they were making this defense for not thinking that Trump was a divinely instituted, not instituted, but a divinely driven agenda, we'll say. It dawned on me, we have so many political leaders in the biblical accounts of people that were horrendous human beings at times, or just legitimately called by God, good people, but made terrible mistakes. And my head immediately went to King David, who literally had a friend of his put at the front lines to ensure that he would die so that he could have his wife. Like, these are not guys that you would think, yeah, God sent us that guy. But we know God sent us that guy. So what are your thoughts as it relates to President Trump, but then even applying it to, like, you and I are not perfect human beings. We don't hold perfect viewpoints on all things. So how do we apply
Speak for yourself.
Well, all right, let's hear it.
No, I think there's three things coming to mind. One, there's a great scene from Rudy, the classic that everybody should watch this weekend about Rudy Rudiger, who plays football for the Notre Dame, and he's struggling because he's trying to get in to the university and he can't get in. And so a priest comes into the church and he's what's bothering you, Rudy, and stuff. And Rudy's like asking these questions: why hasn't God allowed this or allowed that, whatever it might be? And the priest responds, in my 30 years of theological training, there's only two things I know. One, there is a God, and two, I'm not him. So we don't have all the answers. We're not God. We don't understand exactly how God necessarily works. Two, with that being said, C.S. Lewis, great theologian, talks about the reality that God either cooperates with us as his children, like he asks his children to do something, the children respond enthusiastically because they're in a state of grace, they're in a state of love with their Father, that they respond to that call or invitation, and they do great things for God. Or God uses us as his tools. And so someone is going against maybe God's will or God's plan, but we know from Romans 8:28 that God works for the good, all things for those who love him. And God works for his people constantly. He's always laboring for us. And so he uses even our negative things, our negative choices that we make to turn out for the best because he just works it out because that's who God is. Oh, happy fault, that Adam kind of sinned. Now, when it comes to our political leaders, you're absolutely right. I mean, you look at even Cyrus in the Old Testament. I think he commissioned the rebuilding of the second temple. So there's precedence for God using people who aren't even his chosen people to perform his ultimate plans. With all of that being said, I mean, I think we have to have a bar, right, that we're trying to reach for every one of us, that we try to be perfect. We are holy as our Heavenly Father is holy, and we desire the best political candidates, the best people running for office. So is Trump perfect? Absolutely not. Any one of us perfect? Absolutely not. Does God still use us? Yes. But God can most quickly and most efficiently, most evangelically accomplish his plans the more holier we are. So the more that you have individual leaders that commit themselves to holiness, the Lord can use them exponentially more powerful. And so I think that's what we're looking for and desiring. So did God appoint President Trump? I don't know, but I do know that he's going to use President Trump in his position to do really, hopefully, please God, some great things because that's who God is. He uses flawed leaders to kind of do that. And quite frankly, he used President Biden, who's a very flawed leader, to bring about, I think, an awakening in the country to just how crazy the Democratic Party has gone to the left on some of these issues, especially transgenderism and things of that nature. And you really saw a backlash to that. So it's up to us now to take advantage of this opportunity we have to kind of move forward as a country.
Well said.
Speaking of moving forward, Matt Huffman, the current Senate President of Ohio, has been unanimously elected by the Ohio House of Representatives as the Speaker for the 136th General Assembly. This is a good thing for the state of Ohio. I've sat across the table from Matt a couple times. He is very much a straight shooter. One time, confidentially in conversation, he asked me a question. I kind of gave him a political roundabout, and then he said, I was hoping for more of a truthful answer. So I was like, okay, you're right. So I gave him the truthful answer. With that being said, Matt's a really good guy. He's not making deals with progressives so that he can become Speaker of the House. He is someone that has a track record of getting things done. So Matt, God bless you. Good luck to you. Good, faithful Catholic. Hopefully you can continue growing your faith as well. All right, number 4. Speaking about growing in your faith, my Lord help us. President Biden has basically just honored a mass murderer. This is from the Washington Times. The Presidential Medal of Freedom. Now, this was created to recognize people who have made an especially meritorious contribution to 1, the security or national interest of the United States, 2, to world peace, or 3, cultural or other significant public or private endeavors. So, Mr. Biden just bestowed the honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, to Cecil Richards. She was the president of Planned Parenthood from 2006 to 2018. He did this behind closed doors. It wasn't even on his public schedule. We didn't know about it until he tweeted about it. And he said, today I had the honor of awarding Cecil Richards the Presidential Medal of Freedom because of her work to help America be what it is, a nation of freedom, to defend and advance women's reproductive rights. Cecil Richards presided over the abortions of 3.9 million babies as president of Planned Parenthood. Look, I'm praying for her. She has terrible brain cancer right now. Pray for her soul. But this is absolutely disgusting. This is the biggest representation of the culture of death when we honor those who are killing the babies. And look, Planned Parenthood, they need to be defunded. Lila Rose posted just the other day, Planned Parenthood spent $40 million last election cycle to elect Democrats. That's just Planned Parenthood. I don't think that includes their action fund, which is their political arm. But Planned Parenthood got $670 million from the government last year. So we paid Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood spent money on the election to elect progressive Democrats who support abortion. Yeah, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Planned Parenthood, please, President Trump, do something to defund them in this next administration. However, number 5, none of that is going to happen, though, if the deep state kind of gets its way. And here's what's going on. And look, I don't have a crystal ball, but I was listening to Tucker Carlson the other day, and I think he made a really solid point. Don't agree with everything Tucker says, but he said, how do you stop a president's domestic agenda? You create an international crisis like Vietnam or, Afghanistan war. You can't get much done domestically because much of your focus is on what's going on internationally in these wars. So how do you stop President Trump's domestic agenda, like, Dodge's efforts, Department of Government Efficiency? You start a war. And this is what President Joe Biden just did. He's authorized Ukraine to use powerful long-range American weapons inside Russia, according to 2 U.S. officials familiar with the decision, as North Korean troops deploy in support of Moscow's efforts. So here's what's going on. 50,000 North Korean troops have deployed to the Ukrainian border, ready to fight the Ukrainians in this war. So we sent long-range American missiles over to Ukraine. Here's the big deal. In September, Vladimir Putin argued or said that this was his red line, that if there is an attack, an assault using conventional missiles, Western missiles from Great Britain or America, that he would consider that an act of war. So we literally did something that Putin said he thought would be an act of war, drawing us into this conflict. We should not be fighting a war in Ukraine, okay? Sending some small arms or things of that nature, okay, you might be able to convince me of that, but the billions of dollars, money that we're just printing and then sending over there, even when the Department of Defense has just admitted that they have no idea where hundreds of millions of dollars have gone, let alone how are we tracking where those millions of dollars are going in Ukraine right now? This is dangerous stuff. And why we need to be on our prayers, or on our knees, just praying as much as we can. St. John Paul II said, war is a defeat for humanity. And look, you guys know, I've been a critic of President Trump. And so, say good Trump, bad Trump, certainly we'll disagree. Well, one of the things that he's done, which has been good, has kind of put more light on the military industrial complex that we have here in the United States of America. Some of these companies, they don't make money unless machines of war are being made and they're being used to kill people overseas. And so if there isn't ongoing wars, these big companies aren't making money. And President Biden is just supporting the efforts to get us into what would be a horrible, awful, and potentially nuclear war with Russia. We have to pray. All right, number 6.
Wait, before you move on from that,
please, go ahead.
What are your thoughts about people? I've been hearing a lot of talk about he's bluffing. Maybe, but
who's bluffing?
Putin. That he's bluffing that he would, and he's over here saying that it would potentially happen before Christmas, and I just don't feel comfortable assuming that. Maybe he's bluffing. I'd like to hope he's bluffing, but I also don't want to assume he's bluffing. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are this. Vladimir Putin has no moral compass. He has detained. He has, in many cases, there is instances of political opponents being drugged, being killed, being dragged out of the streets in protest. There is no moral compass. He started a war to get back land that he feels belongs to the motherland of Russia. These individuals care about power and maintaining power. And if you don't have a moral compass when it comes to making these types of decisions, you could be pushed to the brink of making some pretty crazy decisions. And so I'm not willing to bet my safety, my family's safety, the country's safety, the world's safety on, well, maybe he is simply bluffing. Maybe he is, but are you willing to kind of take that risk? He hasn't shown himself to be anything other than someone who wants to gain back all the land area that has been lost since the fall of the USSR. From Georgia to the Ukraine, he continues to begin wars in Eastern Europe. He continues to test nuclear missiles with the capability of reaching the United States of America. It's simply not a risk I'm willing to take. All right, number 6. Cultures are not equal, from Fox News. I don't know if you saw this, but this is incredibly, incredibly disturbing. It's one of the reasons that just bothers me so much when people are like, "Oh, you're a Christian nationalist or whatever," and that's just another way of trying to peg somebody as being kind of alt-right or a white nationalist or someone who's kind of crazy. They want to bring theocracy onto the nation, all those things of nature. Look, all I want to do is make sure our laws have kind of a structure. And when you cut off our laws from being connected to their roots, like where do our rights come from, for example, or where do we believe, or why do we believe in human dignity? And you might say, well, I simply believe that every person is equal, right? Well, why do we believe that every person is equal? Well, they're made in God's image and likeness. And that comes from the scriptures. That comes from God himself. It comes from the Bible. So when you cut off that foundation, though, to that beautiful teaching about human dignity, that beautiful teaching itself will eventually die. It's kind of like cutting the flower off from its stem. Yeah, that flower might look pretty for a couple days, but eventually it's going to die. So we believe in a Judeo-Christian heritage in this nation. Now, compare that or contrast that to other people's ideas about the dignity of the human person, the dignity of women, the dignity of individuals who struggle with same-sex attraction, all those things of that nature. Let's look at that. So right now, young girls in Iraq who are years away from becoming teenagers could be forced to become wives if a new Shia-backed law passes in that country. So in Islam, there's kind of two major sects. You have the Sunnis and the Shia have brought forth a law. The new law would lower a girl's consent from age 18 to age 9. There's not a girl in the world that is ready to consent to marriage at age 9. So not all cultures, not all religious viewpoints are the same and are equal. It doesn't mean we can't have reverence and appreciate and have interreligious dialogue, but it is absolutely insane to say that every religion and every viewpoint is the same, is of equal value or equal worth. So whether you live in a country which is predominated by Hinduism, Islam, or some atheistic understanding of the human person, nothing compares to the Judeo-Christian foundation for law, which is the best system the world has ever seen. It's one of the reasons that France had multiple bloody revolutions, and we had one here in the United States of America.
Well, and I saw a story recently about how there was a girl in Portland. There was a girl in Portland who was refusing to marry someone that her dad was trying to marry her off to. And I think he tried to kill her or something. Oh, like this is not, you cannot compare what we are doing in our, Western Christendom, right? Like we are a society of love and of mercy in the ideal when we are at our best. And so I just think that it's so intellectually dishonest to pretend otherwise. Yeah. Yet so many people are willing to be that intellectually dishonest. Yeah. And frankly, not to be unnecessarily polarizing, but it's relevant. It's kind of just as it's probably the same crowd of people that are being intellectually dishonest for the last 2 to 3 years that current President Joe Biden was a functioning president who ought to be our president again. And it's the same crowd that was being intellectually dishonest to say, yeah, Kamala Harris was a good candidate for the Democratic Party. It's like there's this whole part of the country, a minority, as we just learned in the vote, that is insisting on clinging to things that are just blatantly untrue. Yet we shouldn't be surprised because they also want to cling to these ideas that you can be something other than a boy or a girl or something other than what God made you. It's just this insistence on clinging to untruth.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and the world religions, there are some similarities in the world religions. However, when you get to the core foundational beliefs, those core foundational beliefs are different on, how we were created, where do we come from, how do you achieve salvation, where do you go after salvation has been won, how are you called to live in the public square with your family, what is the role and the dignity of women. On some of these kind of core issues down deep, there are profound differences in the spiritual texts of these major world religions and the major teachings of these religions as well. So they are not similar. There might be some, again, surface teachings that are same, love your neighbor as yourself, things of that nature, but that isn't the core teachings of those faiths, which are really, really important. And Muhammad didn't claim to be God. Moses didn't claim to be God. The Buddha did not claim to be God, but one of the founders of the major world religions claimed to be God, and that was Jesus Christ, who said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." Either he is that, or he's a madman, and we have to make a choice at the end of the day, and our choice is Jesus Christ. All right, number 7. Here's the problem, though. We've lost the moral high ground as a country because we've just embraced all this woke stuff where everything's equal, and because we've said everything is equal, you have these crazy ideas which have risen to the surface, and nowhere is that more clear than Jaguar. Have you seen the new commercial for the Jaguar company?
It's horrendous.
Yeah, the car brand released a new promotional video debuting its reimagined logo on its X account under the slogan, "Copy Nothing." It features androgynous models in brightly colored over-the-top outfits, including one man wearing a dress, along with other slogans: "Create exuberant, live vivid, delete ordinary." Delete ordinary. What's ordinary? Nothing is more ordinary nor more beautiful than a man and woman coming together in marriage to love each other for the whole of their lives. But let's delete that, just like Black Lives Matter wanted to delete the nuclear family. That's what these people are after. And I don't know what they're doing from an economic standpoint. It's absolutely silly and stupid. I mean, this is their Bud Light moment. But with all that being said, it is another attempt by individuals who have authority, who have power, and have millions of dollars to create these commercials to muddy up the waters about what is good, true, and beautiful, which hurts our ability to see clearly what is the way that God has called us to live. And they do that everywhere from these car commercials. They do it to our kids' cartoons, to our kids' books in public schools. And it's the whole indoctrination system we've created here in the United States of America to confuse people about their gender, about their sex, about their ultimate purpose and meaning in life. And it's why you have the highest rates of mental challenges in this country that this country's ever seen right now. All right, number 8.
Wait, on that note, though, it's so interesting because Jaguar is a brand that for a long time, nobody has cared about. Nobody is like, I'm going to get a Jaguar one day when I grow up. Like, people might say that about a Corvette. They might say that about, like, some Italian cars, but like nobody is like dreaming of a maybe somebody, but like nobody's really doing that. And that's been true for a long time. I can remember when I was a kid, Jaguar was a cool brand that I might see in certain contexts, but there's this desperate grab for attention that is manifested in what they did in this advertisement campaign, where it's so over the top and egregiously, frankly, ugly. It's such a distortion of goodness. And it's such a cry of desperation for attention. And, on the one hand, I want to like encourage people to not give them any clicks and not look it up. On the other hand, it's like, you got to understand how absurd it is what's happening out there. But this is a brand nobody has cared about for a while, and now they're getting plenty of attention, but it's for all the wrong reasons. So,
well, it's because these people have kind of adopted these DEI offices, diversity, equity, inclusion, and they feel like this is the way to promote social welfare in the country, that if everyone is accepted, no matter their lifestyle, that makes for a positive America. But I don't think everybody's lifestyle is equal. And so we see this again with the Fortune 100 companies. Number 8, our businesses are more willing to pay for abortions than for babies. Alexandria DeSantis and Nathaniel Blake, they did a report for Ethics and Public Policy Center documenting the family policies of the Fortune 100. So they look at each one of those companies and what are the policies they support or do not support around the family. Well, in this report, the majority of these companies will pay for abortion tourism, meaning they'll send their employees to go get an abortion in another state if their state doesn't support abortion. Then they do covering and supporting people who have babies in their companies. Look, we should be giving baby bonuses out to people who have babies rather than the other way around. Our replacement rate right now in the country We are at roughly 1.6, 1.7%. The replacement rate is around 2.1%. It is a sign of societal sickness that we're not having enough kids. So what does corporate America do? They promote killing more kids rather than having babies. We're literally going to have a system that's going to collapse on itself here in a few years because you have more and more people retiring. You don't have enough people paying into the government to these social security nets that take care of people at the end of their life. And so you're going to have individuals and the government saying, well, we can no longer support these people who are struggling. What do? They're going to ration care. It's just a reality of economics that's going to lead to some really terrible moral things in this country because we're promoting death more than we are promoting life. But you won't hear about the demographic collapse in this country, let alone the state of Ohio that's taking place, because the media just basically lies to you. So number 9. He wasn't fascist after all. You probably don't watch MSNBC's, if you watch this show, Morning Joe, but Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough, they spent years, like literally the last 3 years, telling you that Trump was Hitler, that he was fascist, that he was a threat to democracy, he was going to kill people. Well, President Trump won the election, and they met with him, and they had talked about the conversation they had with him. So either they just met with a fascist, and they're admitting that, and they're talking about cooperating with a fascist and opening the lines of communications with a fascist, or they actually didn't believe that he was a fascist, and they were trying to scare you into voting a particular way. It's just the height of irony here that these groups talk about these people being Hitler and other people, but then yet when they win an election, they're willing to meet with them because they want to be friends with those in power, whatever it might be. Number 10, Republican senators need to show up for their jobs. It's just really, really important. Right now, Joe Biden's picks for the federal bench this week, they've just been flying through because some Republican senators are not there. Now, J.D. Vance, give him a pass. He's on the transition team. He's vice president. But there's some other senators that need to get into office because when President Trump came into office, there was over 100 appointments, federal judiciary, that were available to him to kind of impact the country in a positive way, because these judges hear all these cases on life. They hear all these cases on the transgender issues. They hear the cases on immigration and things of that nature. And based upon how these judges rule, whether they're an activist judge or whether they're a judge who believes in the Constitution, could impact the country for years to come. Now, when President Trump gets in office, because Biden's just appointing all these federal judges into office right now because the Republicans aren't showing up, doing whatever they're doing, President Trump will have half the opportunity to make an impact in the federal judiciary than otherwise. So please, Republicans, show up and make sure that President Biden can't put in any more activist judges. He already appointed somebody to the Supreme Court of the United States who can't define what a woman is, let alone when life begins. So that's the type of people who are going to get on the federal judiciary here unless Republicans fight hard to keep that from happening. And here's why this matters, because they will hear cases like number 11 and our final story. Nancy Mace, Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina, introduced legislation Monday to change House rules to prohibit transgender women. Let's just say this, to prohibit men from using women's bathrooms and other facilities on Capitol Hill, a proposal that comes just before the House prepares to swear in its first openly transgender member of Congress. She's also expanded this legislation now to include all kind of federal land and buildings all across the United States. And I can understand why she's done this. Nancy Mace herself is a survivor of sexual assault. Her very body has been violated by a man, and so it's understandable that she doesn't want men in women's spaces. So I can understand her passion about this, but she shouldn't even have to be fighting this fight. Where are all the men? From the Capitol to our own schools, we've gone along with this insanity that boys can be girls and girls can be boys, and we refer to individuals with whatever the preferred pronoun. We've gone into this. I've been on calls with Catholic dioceses, for goodness sakes, where the Catholic representative from a diocese will introduce themselves as he, her, or she, her, or a different pronoun or whatever it might be. Stop the madness. Stop the insanity. And yes, you could lose your job if you won't use the correct pronoun or the person across the room for you. So be it. Do not go along with a lie. As long as we go along with the lie, eventually it's going to end up with you or I in prison. It's better to lose our job than ultimately to lose our family and lose our livelihoods and our ability to be Catholic citizens unless we stop going along with this false identity stuff. And it does us no good. if we refer to people as, queer individuals or my gay friend, whatever it might be, that feeds into an identity which is not of God. Their identity is one of being a son or daughter of Jesus Christ. And the more that we use this language, which wants to help people identify with their sexuality or their ideas about their sexuality, just doesn't help. Here at the Catholic Citizen, we stand for truth, for sanity, and for the Catholic way. The Catholic way loves everybody, doesn't treat anybody different when it comes to caring for them, walking with them, loving them, but it doesn't tolerate bad, dangerous ideas. And bad, dangerous ideas end up leading to men using the girls' restroom, taking advantage of situations and places which makes women feel uncomfortable and sometimes has led to women being assaulted. That's not what we should be standing for. It's not the type of country we want to live in, and it is not the Catholic way.
And it is absurd if anyone ever implies that that doesn't happen. It has happened. Like, it has blatantly happened. And I didn't know we'd go into this ahead of time. I would have maybe drawn up some examples from news stories that have come out. But, there was that gentleman who was wearing skirts and stuff in high school, and he assaulted a girl in the women's bathroom. And then what the school board did is they just transferred him to another school. And guess what? He did exactly the same thing again to another girl there. It's just horrendous. Again, clinging to living a life of untruth.
Yeah, that was just one example that came out of the state of Virginia. I just read another example that came out of, Canada's fully embraced this kind of woke policies, and was just reading a story about a man in kind of pink underwear, pink swimming suit that invaded the women's restroom and made these girls feel completely uncomfortable. The mom complained about it, and she was told under the Equal Rights Commission there in Canada that there's nothing we can do about it. And we celebrate people and their different challenges and things of that nature. Although these girls being kind of completely scarred, they were changing, getting naked, and then this man just walks in, this man who has the male body parts and is just staring at them in the locker room. Is that really what you want for your young girls, your young daughters? I certainly don't. I certainly pray that you don't as well. Let's end with a word of prayer here.
Hang on, wait. We have a question from YouTube.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have American Patriot 76 says, do you think Trump's second administration will be better than his first administration?
It's a great question. And again, I don't have a crystal ball. There's no way of telling that. I think some of the challenges will be the deep state, the bureaucratic nightmare which exists in Washington, D.C. will do everything at their disposal to keep President Trump from being successful in this second term. We don't know what that looks like. I do know that some of his appointments, have been very positive. You look at Marco Rubio, for example, as Secretary of State. I did see that Matt Gaetz actually removed his nomination today. Personally, he said he didn't want to be a distraction to the administration. So hopefully there's an attorney general that's appointed that's going to be really strong on cleaning up the FBI and the CIA and different places of that nature. I think there's a great opportunity in these first couple years because we have a pro-life control of the Congress, a pro-life control of the Senate, and then, of course, an administration which at least his track record has been pro-life. So you got to get as much done as you can in this first couple years. Vivek Ramaswamy has talked a little bit about, under the new Supreme Court rulings, the ability to say that a lot of the statutes that have been put in place by the bureaucratic kind of structures there can be rendered null and void because it really should be Congress who is making and passing laws and regulations and things of that nature. So Vivek has made the argument that under the Supreme Court's most recent ruling considering this, that you could take these departments that exist because all the different rules exist, and you could say, well, because these rules are really null and void, they should have been done by Congress, that these departments can be cut themselves, because otherwise it's really hard to actually go in and just start firing people because of all, again, the limitations they put in by law to actually fire a federal employee. It's not easy to go in and clean house. So there's an opportunity, but there's a short window. Normally, the midterms are won by the other party, so it's going to be very much a challenge. But as long as there isn't a major international conflict and President Trump can kind of focus on domestic policies, I think the sky's the limit as far as what can be accomplished. But again, don't be surprised that the progressive left will bring out all stops to stop President Trump from doing what he needs to do. And look, we could go down a rabbit hole when it comes to conspiracy theories, but here's the reality. The United States of America had engaged for many years the testing of biological weapons around the world. And one of the things, gain-of-function research that they had been testing was in the Wuhan lab in China, gain-of-function research, in planting these kind of things in animals. We know that it came from the Wuhan lab when it comes to the COVID virus. I'm not saying that the United States government purposely sent that out or the Chinese government sent that out, but the reality is...
But we're also not saying that they didn't.
The reality is that certainly changed the whole course of really human history in many ways, because it impacted the 2020 elections. There was mail-in ballots. Suddenly, Democrats had 20 more million votes than they normally had in an election. A lot of things changed. But President Trump, almost in God's providence, again, going back to that beginning question that Nick had, God uses all the events in the world to kind of work out his good. President Trump in this term now has the control of Congress. He has the control of the Senate, and now maybe has more opportunity to get things done than he would have if he would have won in 2020. So it's amazing how God might work. But thanks for the question. Really good question. We'll see what happens. All right, we ready to pray?
Let's do it, man.
All right, thank you for watching The Catholic Citizen this week. Continue to fight the good fight. Believe in a God of love and goodness, but let all our knees be bloody as we are on our knees praying day and night for peace in this world, for peace in our hearts, and peace in the womb, where it must begin to create a culture of life. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. No, in all these things, we are more than victorious. We are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus, our Lord. Romans 8:37-39. Nothing can separate you from the love of Jesus Christ. Cling to that with all that you have. And we'll see you next week on The Catholic Citizen. Take care, everybody.